This isn't the most beautiful part of this recipe. It's like a massacre. Welcome to Earth Eats. I'm Kate Young, and today we're going to make a kale salad with roasted tomatoes. This is a great way to treat tomatoes that may not be perfectly vine ripened. These tomatoes did come from my garden, but it was at the end of the season and they didn't quite get fully red on the vine, but they have ripened indoors on the counter. And this is a great way to deal with tomatoes like winter tomatoes or tomatoes you might get from the grocery store that you want to really add some flavor to them by caramelizing them. And so if you roast them slowly in the oven, it does kind of concentrate those flavors. And it doesn't really matter how you cut these for roasting, you just want to make them relatively even so that they will roast at relatively the same amount of time. Place them on a baking tray. You don't want to overcrowd the baking tray because you want them to dry out a little bit. Then you're going to add some garlic cloves, and you don't need to peel them. You can just put them in whole. We're going to roast them and then we'll peel them after they're done. And then you can take some fresh herbs, tuck them under the tomatoes a little bit because I don't want them to burn. I also really want that flavor to transfer to the tomatoes. So this is thyme from the garden. The thyme, like a lot of herbs, it'll just kind of keep going all winter. I've pushed snow off the thyme before and it's still green underneath. So you can cook with it all winter long. I might go grab a sprig of rosemary from one that I have in a pot. Rosemary will not survive the winter. Rosemary needs to be brought indoors. I have trouble keeping it alive indoors as well, but we're giving it another try this year. A few grinds of pepper on there, a little bit of salt, and then a drizzle of olive oil. You want to roast these at 375 for 20 minutes or so. You want them to still have some of their shape, but they do dry out quite a bit. They kind of brown around the edges, they caramelize, and the garlic will get really soft. So once your tomatoes are fully roasted, and you want to let them cool for a little bit so you can peel the garlic, and that garlic is just really nice and soft roasted garlic. It's such a great flavor. It completely transforms the garlic to roast it like that. A lot of the herbs have kind of disappeared, but you can see a few leaves in there. They'll add some nice flavor, and I think that the tomatoes themselves have some of that flavor. And you're going to just want to chop these up. They do shrink quite a bit, so keep that in mind when you're deciding how many you want to make. And I'm just chopping the garlic up with the tomatoes in there. It's just all going to get mixed together. So we have our tomatoes and garlic all prepared and ready. And now we're going to deal with the kale. And this is some fresh garden kale that comes from my neighbors across the street, Michael and Julia and Xavier. They were kind enough to let me use this for our recipe. So we just want to remove it from the stem. You can use any kind of kale in this recipe. You can use curly kale, or dinosaur kale is really nice in this. And once you got it off the stem, I take a stack of leaves, sort of roll it up and slice it into ribbons like a chiffonade. It is not one of my favorite leafy greens. I'm really a fan of spinach and chard, but when I learned how to prepare kale this way, I kind of fell in love with it because this is a really nice preparation. The first time I encountered this, I was having a baby shower. Some good friends of mine were throwing a baby shower for me in Houston. It was a potluck. My friend Melanie showed up with this gorgeous kale salad that she'd made, and it had pomegranate seeds in it. And it was gorgeous, just these jewels glistening in this bed of green kale. And I just really, really love this salad. It tasted so good. It's so fresh. So we're not really going to be cooking the kale, but we're also not going to leave it completely raw either. So I'll show you what I mean. Once you get your kale chopped and ready, you're going to put it into a nice big bowl, and you're going to sprinkle some nice coarse salt all over it, and just be generous with it. And then we're going to put a little bit of olive oil on there as well. And then we're just going to take and massage the salt and the oil into the kale leaf. And this is what I mean by not just leaving it. Some people call this salt cooked, and that's how I sort of see it. You are transforming the kale leaf, definitely, but not through cooking, through salting and through this agitation. And it really does change it. It kind of breaks down the cell walls, perhaps, of the plant and makes it more tender. It also brings out a sweetness that I really like. So then we're just going to let that sit for a little bit. Let the salt break that down a little bit. I've also got some toasted pine nuts here, and I just toasted these in the toaster oven. I just baked them for like 5 minutes or less, keeping an eye on them. I've got a lemon here. I think the lemon really brightens up the flavor of this salad. So I just squeeze a little lemon juice in there. You could also probably put some zest in. Roasted tomatoes and garlic in there. Give that a toss. Add some toasted pine nuts. The final ingredient for this kale salad is some shaved Parmesan cheese. You could also use grated, but I really like the shaved with this. Just add a richness, a little bit of fat. Completes this salad. I've made it with other fruits. I've made it with grapefruit segments. So there's just a lot of directions you can go with this basic method of salt cooking your kale. I really love this combination with the caramelized tomatoes and the garlic and the pine nuts with that warm nutty flavor, and then the Parmesan cheese. Well, the garlic is really coming through in those tomatoes, but it's a mellow garlic. It's not that sharp bite that you get with raw garlic. Tomatoes have such a tang, and the texture of this kale is so nice. It still has that crunch that you get with a raw, fresh green, like a salad green, like lettuce or something, but it's tender. It's made tender by that salting process that we went through. So it's such a great salad, and it holds up really well. This is something great to bring to a gathering if we ever gather again. So thank you for joining me today. Follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Earth Eats. Subscribe to our podcast at your favorite podcast app. We'll have more info down in the description. Thank you, and we'll see you next time.